As a trauma survivor, I have always been interested in resilience. But growing up, I believed it was something that you were born with. Then in graduate school, I learned that it was a quality that we all possess and a set of skills we can all strengthen. Most of my resilience has come from writing and seeing myself in new ways by confronting the stories I've always told myself. The more I did that, the stronger I became, and I've dedicated my life to helping others do this work. This podcast is for anyone who wants to understand their story and how to revise it, because when we do that work, we change the world. Have you ever been working on a tough story only to hear a voice in your head say, maybe you're not good enough, or maybe this isn't the project for you? How do you know if it's self-sabotage or a wise part of you that's trying to get your attention? This is something Donna Moriarty has struggled with as she works on her memoir. She's a professional writer who's been published in the New York Times, Ms. Magazine, and The Keep Things, among others. That's why this problem caught her completely off guard. She typically knows when things are working and when to take a break. But as she works on her memoir, her inner compass seems to be broken, and she's wondering what to do about it. Join us as we explore the voices that sabotage, the ones that support us, and how to tell them apart on this week's episode of the Writing Your Resilience podcast. Let's dive in. Hey, writers, have you written a draft or two of a memoir only to feel completely lost? Do you wonder what the story really is or how to structure it? Or have you received competing advice from some people who love certain parts of your story while others don't? Or worst of all, have you been ghosted by agents and editors or received the cryptic, great writing, but just not for us email? Most writers think the answer is diving deeply into their pages. But to figure out what's missing, what needs to be retooled, and what needs to be tossed, you need a bird's eye view of your manuscript. That's what I'll provide in Camp Structure, my proven program that will help you understand how stories work, decide what parts of your life actually belong in your book, and develop a clear path through the revision landmines most memoirists face. As a member of Camp Structure, you'll benefit from expert coaching, membership in a motivated cohort, monthly Ask Me Anything office hours, and instruction that will help you finish this book and the next one. So if you want to feel confident about the story you're telling, clarity around how to write it, and the focus needed to get the job done, sign up for Camp Structure by clicking on the link in the show notes. Camp begins on Tuesday, September 10th, which will be here before you know it, so be sure to grab your spot. Well, hello, Donna. Welcome to the Writing Your Resilience podcast. I am so delighted to see you again and to have you on the show.
Well, I'm really happy to be here, Lisa. Thanks for having me on.
So, listeners don't know, or people who are watching on YouTube, but you and I worked together for, gosh, what was it, 9 months, almost a year?
I think it was close to a year, yes.
Yeah, so we got to know each other really well, and I got the privilege of knowing about your story, which we may or may not talk about today. But what I want to find out first is what would you like people to know about you as a writer and anything about your project?
Well, thank you for asking because I like to tell people that I've been writing for my whole life, that it actually began when I was in second grade and I used to tell tall tales, we'll say, and a teacher told me I was a spinner of stories and
I
that
love that.
actually right it just shifted my perspective of what I was doing and it helped me it gave me the confidence to publish my first short story in my high school literary magazine. And so then in my 20s, I actually wrote a lot and I submitted for publication. That sort of led to, I mean, it was interrupted really when my husband and I started our family, and
Mhm.
then I had a career in communications. So for a long time, I was writing a lot of material that didn't really require very much creativity. So now I also want to say that I write for higher education clients.
Mhm.
I have no trouble writing these stories. I get curious about the subject. I write stories that are sort of flow easily. It is not that way as I'm writing my memoir. So I'm
Yeah.
working on a memoir about loss. It has felt like a mystery almost from the beginning,
Mhm.
and even though I've been, writing literally every day of my life, I feel inadequate to the task of
Mm.
turning this story into something that has meaning for readers. And I keep hitting snags that makes me wonder if I have what it takes and whether I should
Mhm.
give up and move on to something else that doesn't feel like torture.
Great question in there. should I give up? And or should I be spending my time on something that doesn't necessarily feel like torture? Does that sound like the question you're coming to
Yeah, it's a
the
great way to state
podcast
it.
with
Yeah.
today?
Yeah.
Yeah, and my heart is connecting to yours as a person who also writes about loss because, oh my gosh, it can be so difficult to wade in that material because when you're writing, and especially when you are immersing the reader in scenes. So, this, if you're not sure what I mean by scene, I'm talking about cinematic writing. For those of you who are listening, a part of your brain relives it. It's actually the mirror neurons in the brain. They fire in the same way as if the event is happening because the brain does not actually know the difference between imagination and what's happening right now. So that can create all kinds of challenges when we're trying to write. And my cat Foxy seems to agree because she has decided to join us today. So you've been trying to figure out, does the story matter? Where do I go with this? Is there anything else you want us to know before I get into a few things that are the common reasons why we get stuck in this place?
I mean, just to sort of refine my question a little bit, it's really the question of whether the voices in my head are coming from that sort of, traumatic place
Mm,
and they should be disregarded, or whether
mm-hmm.
they're really telling me something like, you know what, you don't have what it takes is probably not, my true self's talking. But,
Yeah.
the practical aspect of the question, which is, maybe I need some more training.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I need a coach. Maybe, like what's the difference? So really it's like, I don't want to give in to this, this idea that, oh, I should just quit. But then again, maybe I do need something else. I don't know if that
Mm-hmm.
refines the question the way, the way I meant to
Absolutely.
do.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. So here are some things that I hear in your question. Which voice do I listen to? Is this part of me that's saying, like, oh, maybe you should, do something else, or maybe you need more help? Is it telling the truth?
Yeah.
Or is this the BS voice from my past that tells me all these stories that are not true and
Right.
sabotages what I want? Because in this, I don't want to read into your experience. I'm just going to talk in generalities now. When this voice comes up, it's often the voice of, I'm not good enough. And that's related to things that happened to us in the past. And does it get us into so much trouble?
You have nailed it. Yes, that is absolutely the question in my heart.
Yeah, so let's talk about the voices for a second. And I'm going to talk
Mhm.
about them in a general way and then I'm going to ask you to chime in and say, is this it? Or is this it or maybe something else?
Okay.
So there are a few different voices inside you. And so the way that I talk about this with a lot of people, this is a trauma-informed way of talking about writing, is to talk about it in terms of parts of self, right? There's when you see me or we see Donna on the screen, you see one human being. But inside us, psychologically, we have different parts. Some of those parts are trying to protect us. Some of those parts are the wounded parts of us. Some of us are the really powerful, strong parts of us. We all have these parts, right? And for some of us, certain parts are more powerful because of the experiences that we've had in our lives. So, the voice we always want to be listening to is the wise one. This is the voice that has our back and knows what we need to do. And sometimes this voice is telling us it's not time to do something, it's not time to work on a project. But then sometimes it's the wounded one. And the wounded one is saying, I'm still hurt, or this feels too vulnerable, or I don't trust you, writer, adult person who's putting their pen to the page to keep me safe. You're trying to publish this. This is when you want to put this out in the world. Are you kidding me? No way. And then there can be this other part, like we'll call it a protector part, that's like, hey, we know wounded part doesn't feel good enough. So we're going to get in your way at every step of the process because we're going to fulfill the fact that you're not good enough. We're going to protect that because that's a truth inside us. Even though, adult you might know that's not true, right? This is stuff I'm working through, or this is a story that is absolutely not true even if my nervous system doesn't yet believe it. But these voices are competing with our desires.
Yeah.
And as
Yeah.
you hear me talk about these different voices, which one do you think is showing up the most?
Wow. If I could, I want to add one more voice, which is
Yeah,
the
absolutely. Go
professional.
for it.
So what I was thinking is there's that part of me, like when I was talking about writing for clients, I know
Mm-hmm.
when a story is not ready, then and I have to do more work and I have to rearrange and I will even want to throw my hands up at times.
Mm-hmm.
But that professional part of me, the craft, knows the craft and knows when it's good enough.
Yes.
And that's another voice that should be the wise one
Mm-hmm.
and isn't always,
No, it
but
is not.
or it's right, or it's very or it can't be heard above the din, I think, of
Mm-hmm.
this wounded one or the protector, or how many other ones were there?
Oh my gosh, there are so
Yeah,
many different pieces
yeah,
of
I
self.
believe that.
Yeah, and so we tendally think about, I mean, this is very simplified, okay? And so if
Hmm.
someone is listening and you are a therapist and you're like, that is not how internal family systems work at the most, literal way, no, it is not. I'm trying to simplify for the sake of talking about writing. But yeah, so we can have the wounded one, we can have protectors, we have the wise self. And I would say the editor falls in between a little bit
Mm.
because the editor is a wise part of us, especially if you're a seasoned writer, which you are, and you write beautiful sentences. And we're going to at least link to your keep things because it's so beautiful. And you may have something else you want to add to this, but you're a beautiful writer. I always have admired your writing and gone, oh my gosh, you are so talented. And yet this editor part, which allows you to do this professional work, which it sounds like we'll call it strong Donna, right? We'll say
Mm.
that's another part. Strong, confident Donna, maybe who, has good connection to the wise one, right? This highest form of self. Strong, confident Donna, professional Donna, she knows how to write. She knows how to get it done for her clients. And so the editor works really well with strong Donna because that part of you knows what it's doing, right? So it's listening, but sometimes the editor comes in at the wrong time. Like we're still trying to create. We don't know what something is yet, so
Yeah.
we don't need you, editor part, yet. We do need you at a certain point, but not yet. So we get bound up in the rules, right? Because
Mm.
we know how to write. You know how to write. So, and I find like as an editor, because I'm constantly reading other people's work and offering people feedback. Then I get to my own, and it's like the feedback, the rules, all this stuff gets stuck in my head. So knowing how to silence that is important. So being able to connect with the part of yourself that is strong and wise with your memoir is a challenge. And Laura Cathcart Robbins, we are actually recording this on May the 17th, which is the launch date for Laura Cathcart Robbins' episode. And one of the things that she said, which was so profound to me about book marketing, is that, when you're marketing a book in any other genre, you're marketing the book. When you're marketing memoir, you are marketing yourself. So,
Oh.
that piece of it makes us feel so much more vulnerable. And that's one of the reasons why we sometimes tap into these other things, the protector and the wounded one. They can speak a lot louder because there can be an identity piece that is connected to your writing, right? And especially when you talk about public facing writing, like when you're writing for your clients, you're writing their stuff.
Yeah, that really gives me another way of thinking about this altogether. I think I've been kind of denying that the content of this lost memoir is
Mm-hmm.
part of what's in the way, that there is something to be protected, that there is something to be wounded. I have to think about that in a different way, I think.
It takes several drafts sometimes to figure out what the story is for yourself. Like every story is answering a question. And it's some question you have inside about yourself, about the world, about how life works.
Mm.
And so when we don't know the question, we don't need the editor as much. We just need this meaning making part of ourselves. And that can feel really vulnerable. But in this process, we want to think about how we're keeping that wounded part of us safe. Like, how are we showing that
Mm.
part of us that we've got it? Some ways we do that is not pushing too hard, not
Mm.
writing too many days of the week about the really sad, hard stuff, or focusing on what does this mean? maybe just a small piece of it. Doesn't have to be your whole project. Cause I think we get stuck on like, oh my gosh, I have to know the essential question for my whole book. And if I don't know that, I can't move forward. Think about what's going on in this chapter or this scene.
Mm.
What sense was made here? What question shows up at the beginning, which is usually related to what this person wants, right? What does your narrator want?
Mm.
How do they get it or not? So thinking in these micro levels can be a way of keeping that, like telling that part of yourself that they're safe, that you've got it. Publishing can smaller pieces, and this doesn't necessarily have to be about your memoir, but other things that are maybe in the creative nonfiction genre that can also say, hey, look, I've got what it takes. And, protector part, I am worthy. So there's usually some worthiness work that needs to be done that's off the page, that's not related to it, that's more therapy driven. Because this is one thing that I've been talking to some writers about, and it was a hard lesson for me to learn. There's this belief that if I just publish the right thing at the right level, in the right way, I will now be worthy. I will have arrived and
Mm.
I can hold the mantle of writer and know that it's going to be easy peasy from now on.
Wow. Yeah. That makes me think about my self-published book.
Mm.
Would you want to hear about that?
Yeah, tell me about it.
Okay. So a number of years ago, I sort of said, okay, by hook or by crook, I'm going to publish a book. I don't care. I have
Mm-hmm.
wanted to do this all my life. And I looked into self-publishing, and I wrote this book on what I know about the art of the apology. It's called Not Just Words. I wrote it fast. It sort of seemed to come out of me. It was a pleasure to write. And then it got out there in the world, and I started to feel like, well, but wait a minute, it's self-published, so I can't talk about it. I can't promote it.
Mm.
I barely mention it to most people. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
I've mentioned it to you before
You
today.
have not.
It's a funny thing because I don't really recognize that I had that worthiness thing going on to
Mm-hmm.
such a degree, because I have often told people, listen, self-publishing is kind of a really great way to go.
Yeah.
There was joy in writing that book, and there was joy in writing a sort of for the family only book of
Mm-hmm.
essays about my, memories and stuff that my kids gave me as a gift one Mother's Day.
Mm.
And there's, oh, but it's self-published. So, I mean, it's almost like the self, it's like the most it's like a comfortable old pair of slippers that are really
Yep.
like a mess. It's like it's so easy to fall into that. Well, but this
Yes.
isn't good enough, because it sort of keeps me sort of small and hidden. And I think you're right when you talk about protection. It's like it seems to be, it's keeping me from putting myself out there in a way that's vulnerable,
Yeah.
or God forbid someone, I mean, if someone criticized my writing, I have enough trouble with somebody criticizing one of my little, pieces. It would be really hard to sort of hear criticism about this
Yeah.
particular loss event in my life, and what happened as a result of it. So yeah, I'm really starting to understand the power of that, of keeping that hidden, of keeping that,
Mm-hmm.
like, not addressing that possibility.
Right. Yeah, and it is so hard to put ourselves out there no matter what you're doing. And I think as women, especially, we are socialized to be caregivers, to think of other people. I mean, there's a whole
Mm.
societal thing that we could add on to this. But one thing that we do generally as people when we've experienced really tough things, when life has been hard, and we've learned that staying small keeps us safe,
Mm.
is that we perpetuate that, and but yet we also
Right.
perpetuate our misery because there is a part of us, it's like, no, I am supposed to have this bigger life, I am called to
Yeah.
do these things. And yet there's nothing wrong with self-publishing, right?
Right.
Self-publishing is a viable way. I will tell anyone who wants to self-publish two things: do your due diligence, write the very best book
Right.
you can, get feedback, get editorial consultation, have somebody do that work for you. However, you also need to market your book. You have to put yourself
Right.
out there, and you have to believe in your work in a huge way. You have to really believe that this is of service to others, and I am going to market the hell out of it because it is
Mm.
of service to others. And there's an episode of the podcast that Ingrid Clayton, she did, and this was at the beginning of this season. So it was in early March. So just look for Ingrid Clayton's episode, and I will also add it to the show notes. In it, she self-published her memoir. And
Mhm.
she had a very specific reason why she did that. Like she had queried 100 agents, she had done all of the work, she had worked with an editor, she did a lot of due diligence, just wasn't happening at that time. So she said, you know what? I'm going to figure out Instagram, which she did beautifully. I'm going to build this platform. I'm going to do these things. And then, because her book is about narcissistic abuse, which is a form of
Mm.
abuse that often makes you second guess yourself and you don't believe yourself, she titled her book Believing Me. And she said, I'm going to
Wow.
believe in me by self publishing. So you got to listen to her say it. She does it so
Oh, yeah.
beautifully. And there's so much more that she has to say about it. But I think learning how to promote yourself helps to rewrite that, but it's really uncomfortable. So having support around that can be really important. And, you said something about, do I really want to wade in this work? Do
Mm.
I want to go back? And earlier this week, I was reading this Substack post by Janine Ouellette. She has a great Substack. And sometimes people will write into her and they will write in with, issues they're having. And it was a lost story. And I'm going to link this in the show notes, but I'm just going to summarize it very quickly. This person was an unwed mother. They weren't sure about motherhood. It ended up being this wonderful experience. And then their child dies in a very tragic way. And they had written all of these pieces during this child's life. And then, of course, the devastation they'd experienced, made them put them away. And now many years have passed and they're coming back to this experience and they want to write about it. And they're trying to figure out, what do I do? And so, do I work towards publishing this stuff that's really beautiful to me, and yet it is also very precious. It's
Mhm.
both precious and beautiful. And Janine had some great advice. So I'm going to read this excerpt from her Substack. Just know that even if you decide to pursue publishing your stories, that choice will not make them more of anything that they are not already. And it could make them less, simply by overlaying the magic of what you now feel for them with the patina of grief and commerce inherent to the publishing process.
Wow.
How's that hitting your body?
That's, I mean, I felt it right in my chest. It was just
Mm,
like there's such a responsibility there, and yet there's also
yeah.
some freedom there too. It's just like, let go of your expectations. Listen to what the story is asking you to do.
Yes. And
Mm.
sometimes the stories we write, especially in memoir, are for us. Sometimes we write them to give ourselves faith that we can write in this way, or they settle a question inside us that allows us to write the thing that is what we're actually supposed to be writing. And sometimes they're supposed to be published. I mean, there's lots of different ways to answer this question, and none are wrong. But I think it's important to say this because so many people will start a memoir and then they think, no, I have to finish it and I have to finish it in this one way or else I'm not worthy or I didn't do the process. That is not true. So many people have what we'll call practice manuscripts. I'm putting that in
Yeah.
quotes
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they teach you things. So I'm going to give you some invitations just because I'm trying to keep these summer short short. But
Okay.
here's some invitations. Sit with that and ask yourself, what does your heart want? And give yourself plenty of time to answer that question in whatever way feels right to you. If you need to put it away for now and maybe forever, and I would just say for now, and then you can pick it up and continue to say, is it forever? Create some sort of ritual that will give you closure around this project so that you have a way of saying goodbye to it and that it's not just rolling around inside you. Say goodbye to this project. And I would also say publish this project, not for the world, but create a tangible object. And often, what I'll tell people, and I've had plenty of clients do this between drafts, go to your local, copy place that publishes things and binds things and create a bound copy that you can hold, create a
Mhm.
cover for it in whatever way you
Wow.
want, but do that so that you can say, this is the copy that is finished for now. It is settling something inside me. I can put it on my bookshelf and trust that it's doing work inside me, even just having that there, that the process has already done something inside me that is changing me, which is changing my environment, which changes how I write. And then if you're supposed to work on it more, you will keep looking at that and it will call you to pick it back up.
Wow. That is so powerful. I've never heard anybody make that suggestion. That goes deep. I sort of want to cry a little bit, but I'm really like hearing what you're saying with that. And it's time for me to ask that question.
Yeah. Go for walks, sit in your quiet spaces, do it in whatever way you want,
Hmm.
but definitely give room for that. It is a okay. And I think that's how we use this process for healing and transformation. We allow it to be what it is.
Hmm.
So, as we wrap up, I want to first
Hmm.
say thank you for trusting me and trusting all of us with your story and your experience.
Well, it was a pleasure, and I totally trust you as well, which is why I came to this.
So, I'm going to wrap up with 3 lightning round questions that I ask
Okay.
everyone. What is the best piece of writing advice that you've received?
I love what Elizabeth Gilbert says in her book, Big Magic. She says, done is better than good.
Yes, it is. And how are you nurturing your resilience as you explore this and also all the writing you've been doing?
I've been trying to listen to that little voice inside me that says, get up from the desk and go outside.
Yes.
I will walk my dog. I will ride my bike. I will walk a labyrinth that's nearby in my neighborhood. I'll just do something to get up, get away from the desk, and go outside. And the other sort of piece that I do, if I'm going to be sitting at the desk, I look for what brings me joy and I write that.
Beautiful. I love that. Everyone should be doing that, right? It's fine to write about the tough stuff, write about the joy too. And if
Yeah.
people want to connect with you, they want to read your writing, they want to know more about you, and they want to know about this book on apology, which you are now going to go out and tell people about because you are an amazing
Yes.
writer. How do they find you?
Best way to find me is through email, which I'm assuming is going to be in the show notes, so people can find me there. I'm also on Instagram. I post a little bit about my writing journey, but it's also just I do a little bit of photography. I post pictures of flowers that I grow in my garden, so that's like a place to kind of get another side of me. And my book, Not Just Words, is at donnamoriarty.com. You can find out more about that book at that website.
And all of that will be in the show notes in case you would like to connect with Donna. Well, Donna, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I am so honored to see you today and to hold space for this journey.
Well, it was such a pleasure to be here. I learned a lot from this conversation, as I have learned much from you over the time that we've worked together. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Are you a writer who struggles with doubts? Do you wonder if your stories are good enough? Do you wish you had some simple tricks that would make the writing life just a little bit easier? Become part of my Writing and Resilience community by signing up for my newsletter. As a thank you, you'll receive a free copy of Write More, Fret Less, 5 brain hacks that will supercharge your productivity, creativity, and confidence. The link is in the show notes. That's it for today's episode. Before you leave, I would love your help spreading the word about this podcast. You can do this in a few very simple ways. Click on the subscribe button in the upper right-hand corner, then leave a 5-star review. You can also let me know what you think or share ideas for the podcast by connecting with me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or through my Writing and Resilience newsletter, which you can have delivered directly to your inbox.